The whole world's history is tangled up with a tale people once called the Otome game, Noblesse Fantasia **. It looked like romance on the surface, but beneath that was a full-on magical action fantasy. In that tale, the final evil you had to crush was Tilty. His bottomless hatred for the world drove player after player into despair, and someone who'd lived through the game's back then swore this one hit different, because it shocked him twice even after he'd already beaten it. He still remembers the first time he got that sick shock, learning why the villain's tears were spilling, and the second hit even harder when a sword saint got chained to her destiny, vowing his whole life to her. The memory slips away, and all that hits him is the sharp clang of steel, right in a grassy field where a sparring match has just ended. A broad-shouldered man looms over a young boy, who's dropped to one knee, and with a fierce declaration, he calls the match over. He refuses to accept defeat, rage and resolve blazing in his eyes. Then he surges forward, grips his sword and shouts, "No, not yet." He ignores his father's begging and lunges forward again, screaming, "I'm coming, Dad," and their blades slam together with a thunderous clang. From the edge of the training grounds, local villagers peer in, and one blurts that the young master is bursting with energy again today, while another nods and says that this strong kid trains like clockwork, every single day. His father grimaces through the boy's onslaught and begs Sword to finally take a break, but Sword fights harder, pushing back with everything he's got while he screams that he can't, not even for a second. With a fierce shout that cracks across the field, he finally spills why he grinds every day, because he can't use magic. Every single day, the same brutal grind plays out at a lonely countryside estate deep inside the kingdom of Albert. Step into Noblesse Fantasia, the game world where magic crackles in the air, and every step turns into an all-out adventure. Born into this savage new world, a boy came into the Ranger family. As a brand new baby, they named him Sword Ranger. He remembered the instant his consciousness snapped to life. There he was, standing in front of a brand new couple that would become his parents. As they hoisted him up, his mind snapped awake, only to realize he'd been reborn in a lonely corner of Noblesse Fantasia, as the minor baron's kid, a nobody side character with zero pull in the main story. He clung to the idea that this reincarnation had to mean something. No way it was just empty, pointless luck. He thought that was the whole truth, until the day his father stepped in front of him and dropped the cruelest reality imaginable. His father's words kept slamming into his mind, because the Ranger family's bloodline isn't just rare, it's forbidden from using magic. That hit like a gut punch. How could he matter in a world of Noblesse Fantasia, where players ruled the forces of nature to save everything, and someone Magicless was basically worthless? Still, his fist tightened with iron resolve. He clung to his faith in fate, and one day he burst out of the attic yelling for his father and everyone around, proudly waving an ancient scroll he'd just uncovered. He hoisted the scroll up high and practically burst with excitement, telling his father that it was the Ranger family's secret art, demon god swordsmanship, handed down from father to son. The technique it describes is pure terror, an insane way to cage demon power inside yourself, turning your body and mind into a living blade that can unleash a deadly flash from its very stance. He stared at the scroll, and realization hit his face like a wave. He couldn't believe something like this even existed in their world, but one unstoppable thought seized him. With this technique, he could tap into a power that was basically a match to his own. He braced himself with fresh fire, yanked his sword up, and swore this was his destiny. He'd master demon god-style swordsmanship from the ground up. His father stood there, watching closely, one hand resting on his head like he knew the future was unfolding. His father cut right through the hype with a brutal bombshell. He admitted the scroll truly was passed down in the family, but then said the secret art was a fake, leaving him staring back in total shock. He told us that for generations, his father, his grandfather, even his great-grandfather, every single one tried to learn from that exact scroll, and not one of them ever managed to pull off the secret art. The man waved toward the calm, pretty landscape, musing that maybe their ancestors only praised it to celebrate descendants who couldn't use magic, and that hope just got stomped out of Sword. His earlier excitement snuffed to nothing. His hope collapsed as he stared at the scroll, and the only thought left was that there was no way. Then his face sank into crushing disappointment. His father's voice kept pushing through, trying to calm the storm in him, reminding him that for generations the Ranger family had guarded this peaceful land, and that even without the demon god style or any magic, this life still wasn't doomed. But Sword wouldn't swallow this peaceful future. He stared up at his father, jaw set in defiance, and exploded, "That's a lie." He clutched that wooden scroll tight, and his voice rang like a vow. He'd proved the demon god style was real, no doubt. From that day on, training with his father kicked into full gear. 3 years tore by in a blur of relentless training. Now he stood older, sharper, and sturdier in every move, but the heart of his dream still wouldn't click into place, because no matter how hard he pushed, he still couldn't pull off the demon god style. His father stood off to the side, replaying the same warning that this deadly technique lived only on paper, nothing more than a stance, and then he pressed the sword boy. "So why won't you just quit?" The boy snapped back at once, defiantly shouting that he refused, and he hammered his vow again and vowed to never, ever quit. Then his father finally sighed and gave in. He told Sword to keep going until he was truly satisfied, but warned them to head home before his mom blew her top. Sword grinned and agreed on the spot. Even after all that brutal training, life still felt warm, because he grew up in a loving family, with a smiling mother, a stern but soft father, and a gentle old maid who always watched over him. They lived in a calm little paradise, saddling up and tearing across open fields on horseback, then coming home to devour hearty meals together around the dinner table. Their home felt perfectly calm, so calm it was almost unreal, where he'd fish by the river while his mom kept a sharp, watchful eye, and honestly, there wasn't a single thing to complain about in that peaceful kind of safety. Even with that peaceful calm all around him, something darker still stirred inside him as he lay there in bed. His eyes stayed wide, locked on the ceiling in the dead silent stillness of his room, and there was no doubt in his face, only sharp, determined focus. He leaned into the night air, locking eyes on the crescent moon, and swore, somewhere in this calm life, one tiny clue about what's coming next was just waiting to be uncovered. He kicks off his day by firing a question at his mother, demanding to know where his father went. She tells him he slipped out at dawn to join a gathering of nobles, while rain hammers the window panes outside. You can't help but wonder why even a noble would get summoned like this. Your mother's got the same uneasy feeling, as she studies the reason behind the call. Deciding he'll train solo, he storms out. Then his mother yells after him, warning him not to push too hard in the rain. 10 years old now, he still keeps swinging his sword every single day, but one question won't quit. When will he finally master the demon god style? He slams the door on every creeping doubt, and his resolve hardens like steel, because he's absolutely convinced mastering the demon god style is his real destiny. In the middle of his training, rain pounded down as a sudden snap from the nearby forest jolted him. He cut his practice short on instinct. Rain hammers down without mercy, pounding a thick, pitch-black forest. He shoves deeper into the trees, breath blasting out of his lungs as he hunts for where that noise is coming from. His gaze snaps to a tiny, pale figure sprawled on the forest floor, and it's a girl. A young girl with long, light-colored hair slumped to the floor inside a mod, her wrists locked tight in brutal shackles. He rockets to her side at once, begging her to hold on, and he fires questions like, "Why are you out in the rain like this?" His voice trembling with pure, panic-struck concern. He dropped to his knees by the collapsed girl, voice shaking with worry as he begged her to tell him she was okay. Then his gaze snapped to her filthy, bare feet, and the iron shackles clamped tight around her wrists, and the truth hit like a punch. This kid had clawed her way out of captivity. As he took it all in, the girl jolted, letting out a painful groan, and terror flooded her eyes as she stared him down. Then, with whatever strength she had left, she rasped a desperate plea. "Run!" But her words only made his head spin with confusion. Beneath a sky blazing with stars, Schwartzfather rides back up to the family estate, his carriage idling in the drive, and he strides straight to the elderly maid, announcing his return while admitting that his work had nearly broken him. He's caught in the foyer the second he steps in, wife at his side, Sword clutching himself nervously, and a tiny silver-haired girl beside them. Sword stammers out a shaky welcome as his mother announces the child is Tilty, but the father's face tightens fast, and he snaps at Sword for bringing this stranger into their family. To settle the matter once and for all, the whole family crowds around the long dining table, while the maid stands ready, waiting to serve. Sword kicks off his explanation. He says he yanked the child out of a magical beast and chose to take her in, and his father listens in silence while Sword insists, that's the truth. His mother says the girl, Garland, seems to have no relatives at all, and when Swords makes a heartfelt plea to his father, the man crosses his arms and falls into deep, heavy thinking. His thoughts snap to a stop, wink, and he flashes a confident thumbs up, saying it's no big deal because doing good is what a real noble does best. Then he slams both hands on the table, roaring with fresh purpose as he declares, "Starting today, I'll be the Tilty Ranger, her sworn protector." While his father throws a celebration, Sword's mind snaps inward, because suddenly he's reliving his past life, the game *Noblesse Fantasia*, where Tilty was the doomed villain, and he knows this is his make-or-break first step toward earning her trust. He stares at the unsuspecting girl and locks in his whole reason for showing up, because he was reborn for one mission only, saving her. Back in the present, his father, grinning because his help plan got accepted, orders Sword to drill Tilty in everything she needs to know, and Sword nods, silently swearing he'll stay right beside her and make sure her salvation actually happens. He steps up to the quiet girl and formally introduces himself, then declares that starting today he's stepping into her life as her big brother. He points out that she's 9, one whole year younger than him, and when he finishes, Tilty can only squeeze out a tiny, shaky sound. She suddenly bolts, fleeing in pure terror, while the sword cries out her name, panicked, and even asks his mother if she's being gentle with the girl. His mother reassures him, yes, she is, and both parents stand there, watching with real worry. Later, Tilty curls up alone on her brand new bed, still distant and shut down, and the whole family quietly backs off, because they know she's still sorting out her feelings, and they decide to give her time instead of crowding her. She leans toward the window, eyes heavy with sorrow, while Sword's mother stands in the distance, gripping Hope tight, praying Tilty will finally crack and let them in. Downstairs, Sword huddled with his parents and spilled everything, his face tight with worry. His mother calmly points out that getting pulled in and called family out of nowhere would crush any kid, and she's got a fair point. Then the conversation snaps into focus when his father drops the truth. His latest job was a slave market cleanup, cooked up and organized by a bunch of nobles. He snaps the pieces together on the spot, firing off a question. Was Tilty one of the slaves they freed on that mission? His father nods and explains that yeah, they did get the captives out, but they never managed to wipe out the broker organization itself. He replays the instant he spotted her shackled and trembling, and it hits him. She must be one of the freed slaves, while the memory of that wolf the slave merchants unleashed slams back into his head. He locks eyes with it and realizes, this is Fenrir, the legendary magical beast. Then it hits him like ice in the blood. The slave merchants aren't hunting anything random, they're zeroing in on Tilty. But the worst part, he can't figure out why. He stared at the real crew hiding behind those slave merchants, then wondered if they were the ones who helped tip Tilty into that fatal blow, the exact ending from the game that's been burned into his memory. His father's voice sliced through the noise in his head, daring him to prove he'd truly mastered the Majinryu technique. So with a swaggering grin, he snatched the sword like he was ready to show it off. Under crescent moon, father and son stepped into a clearing and locked eyes in the stillness, like the whole world went quiet for the moment. He thrust his sword up, eyes locked with pure focus and unstoppable resolve as he readied to strike. He planted his feet hard and dropped into a low, rock-solid fighting stance. As he geared up, his thoughts snapped back to the instant. He slammed his sword up against Finna's strike, and felt a wild jolt of power roar through him and into the blade. He burst out to his father, yelling that the legend was real, because the Ranger family's hidden secret, the ultimate technique handed down through one breath, wasn't a myth. Then right as he swung and poured that power into the strike, his sword exploded with a brutal crack, sending the blade flying off across the hills. Swords went rigid with wide-eyed shock, sweat sliding down his face, while his father stared back, silent, unreadable, like he was measuring him to the bone. His father calmly offered to buy him a new sword, and Sword's panic exploded as he begged him to understand. It was the sword's fault, he truly pulled off the technique. But he still groaned that after that one time, he couldn't land Mage and Ryu again. He clenched his training sword, and his thoughts sprinted. Back in the world he knew, Maiden Ryu's sword style demanded a secret activation condition. If he could uncover it and master the move, he'd be able to shield Tilty every time danger came for her. His determination to protect her hardened the moment the family finally ate together. Sword, his father, his mother, and a quiet Tylee all gathered at the table, and for once, fragile peace settled over them. They didn't let up for a second trying to make her feel at home. Tilty stood there, swamped by nerves in a brand new dress, while the elderly maid clapped like she'd just witnessed magic, and then Sword whipped out a fluffy little creature. His mom shot a warm, supportive wink, and his dad raised a huge fish he'd caught with pure pride. She sat there with their joyful voices all around her, Sword grinning and saying the dress looked adorable, his mom pushing them to whip up something delicious, and his dad bragging, loudly, about that huge fish he'd caught just for her, while Tilty could only freeze, staring wide-eyed and speechless as the love poured in. Later, Sword stood beside his parents while they hashed everything out, his father noting that Sword's mother still hadn't opened up much, and warning him not to shove things along. Swords nodded along, but the worry wouldn't quit. A nasty doubt gnawed at him as he wondered if sharing a home and keeping the peace could really stop the disaster he could already see coming. That night, while thunder tore the sky apart, he couldn't shake the dread that he'd forgotten something huge about Tilty. Then bam, shattering glass exploded outside his door. His eyes snapped wide, and in one heartbeat he realized it was coming from Tilty's room, so he launched into action. Snatching his sword, he tore out of his room and sprinted down the corridor straight for her open door. He screeched to a stop at the doorway, horror contorting his face, and he tore through the air screaming her name. Her room was a full-on wreck, one window blasted to pieces, and glowing-eyed bats swarmed around the bed like they owned the place, while a brutal dark sludge erupted from the shadows and snapped into menacing, wing-like arms. The young girl screamed, clutching her head as the dark power surged in and swallowed her whole. Darkness swallows her whole as bat-like horrors swarm in from every angle, and Sword, still frozen in the doorway, can only stare in terror, begging to understand what these things are and why they've come. Then the shadows tighten around Tilty, and Sword explodes, screaming her name. He lunges in to help, but slams to a stop when horror hits. His sword is still shattered. The demonic bats screamed like knives, ripping the air open as they kept hammering their assault. Frustration crushed him, and he had nothing to use. He decides to hunt down his father for help, but the second he turns, Tilty's voice comes screaming in, pure panic, begging him to stay. He halts mid-step, stunned by her plea. She breaks down in tears, apologizing between sobs, insisting it always happens, and that disaster just can't seem to stay away from her. She clutches her head in total despair, begging for answers, and admitting she doesn't even understand what's happening to her. He locks eyes with her, fires back with fierce determination, and screams that they're not letting her go, because to him, she's already one of the family. Then he confesses to her that his first idea to get help was totally wrong, a blunder. Tilty lifts her gaze, stunned by what he just admitted. She clings to the warmth of how his family welcomed her, and how that kindness saved her, yet the memory now hits like a knife against the torment she's trapped in. She bursts into tears, admitting she hesitated only because she was so damn happy with them, and that pure joy left her feeling exposed. She sobbed, tears pouring down her cheeks, begging them not to keep her there. She said she didn't belong, because if she stayed she'd drag misery onto everyone, and as her words hit the air, a terrifying realization slammed into Sword's mind. He remembered. All right, hold up and remember the game's flashback episode that spills Tilty's dark past, step by terrifying step. This memory recalls how a noble family once guarded the young Tilty with fierce love, until they were slaughtered for being kind. The truth hit him like a thunderclap. His Ranger family, his own family, was the one from the story. He choked on the horrifying truth. If he hadn't tangled himself up with Tilty, maybe his family would still be alive, and one gut-punch tragedy wouldn't exist at all. Right then, Tilty grabbed his attention and pleaded, begging him to chase her away and promise he didn't have to worry about her anymore. He shot forward instead of holding back, clamped his arms around her in a crushing embrace as dark, shadowy energy churned violently around the boat. Her eyes blew wide with shock, fresh tears spilling out as her voice stumbled, begging to know why he'd even pull something like that. His defiance detonated their rage. Shadowy bats shrieked and surged in, their single eyes burning with pure malice. As they swarmed him, he tightened his grip and roared at the bats to stop, then demanded they let him go, right now. His resolve hardened to steel. Staring down at the girl cradled in his arms, he growled, "No, I'm not letting you go." He pulled her into a tight embrace and swore that he, his dad, and his mom were right there for her. No more loneliness, no more doubts, insisting that whatever she had been afraid of, it wasn't what mattered, and that even if something could have brought unhappiness, it wouldn't change that love was real. He smiled warmly, his voice roaring with conviction as he swore she was his precious little sister, and then he pledged his life on the line, vowing he'd protect her no matter what. With his words, every defense collapsed, and tears streamed down T's face as her emotions burst free, because his acceptance never wavered. As she breathed out those words, "Big Brother," the dark, magical energy that had been swarming them exploded outward, then fizzled away, crushed by the sheer force of his vow. Sword's eyes popped wide with shock, and when he scanned the room, now perfectly clear, he realized the darkness was totally gone. She leaned into him, the tears easing into small, relieved sobs. Then, for the first time, pure calm flooded her whole chest. He watched her with a soft, unshakable smile, pure determination blazing through him, vowing to protect her no matter what. The whole moment shattered when the bedroom door slammed open, and Sword's father and mother burst in, shouting for answers. The second they saw what was going on, Tilty sat there in silence and finally admitted to herself that it was the darkness, her power, that had dragged her straight into misery. Sword snapped up as he shot to his feet, training flooding back in his grip, and he stared his parents down, swearing that if that kind of darkness was real, he'd cut it away to protect. His parents stared right back, their faces frozen in shock and awe, as that fierce determination blazed in their young son's eyes. Seeing his son's unbreakable conviction, his father finally gives in, and vows he'll forge the finest sword of all for him. Sword goes wild with joy and shouts his thanks at the top of his lungs. Then he changes the plan on the spot. Sword in hand, he targets the greatest master swordsmith in Gast, while a wide view opens up to a massive, fortified port city roaring with trade and non-stop life. Meanwhile, on a street in Gast, two men burst out of a building and slam into the open air. One's a younger, dark-haired fighter who snarls non-stop at the scumbags inside, swearing he'll never set foot in that smithy again. Inside, the blacksmith woman, young, all sharp focus, smithing goggles shoved up on her forehead, stares as they storm out, seething with pure irritation, and snaps that this is exactly why she can't stand nobles. To get a brand new sword, the adventure kicks off. Sword, his father and Tilty tear out of Oranger, riding a horse-drawn carriage straight for the town of Gus. The carriage rattles over the cobblestones and lands them in a buzzing town square. Crowds everywhere, carts rolling by, and towering multi-story buildings looming over it all. As they step off and push into the crowd, Sword's father takes one look around and goes, "Whoa," calling it a booming town where trade is thriving, rolling in by both land and sea. Then he shifts his focus to Tilty and snaps at her to stick close, because crowds always pull in the wrong kind of trouble. He warns her that this town is ruled by two heavyweight families, the Marquis Hartman house and the Debbie Hiff house, and Tilty nods nervously, like she can already feel the danger closing in. Sensing her unease, Sword shoots her a reassuring look and suggests they hold hands. Then, without even waiting for her reply, he slips his fingers into hers and holds on tight. She flashes him a big, happy smile, thanks him, and even calls him Brother Sword, and the boy lights up, feeling it for real. Tilty has fully warmed up to him. His thoughts swirl as they drift through the packed market square, and he remembers she even begged to join this journey. Her presence carried him. Now all he wants is to stay glued to her side and guard her like his life depends on it. That unshakable resolve snaps instantly. Both of them freeze dead in their tracks, eyes bulging with pure shock because what they're seeing is unreal. Right in front of them, the sights hit like lightning. A kid zips across the air on a broomstick, little ones casually snap up tiny flames in their palms, and a man just flicks a spark from his fingertip to set his skewer of food alight. The boy stands there, frozen in shock, soaking it all in, witches slicing through the sky, vendors sizzling their wares over flames, and townsfolk tossing tiny spells in the street, until one breathless, stunned word bursts from him. Magic. He clenched his fist, and the truth hit like a hammer in wildest fantasia. The magic he'd just seen wasn't some miracle show, it was just everyday power. He shot his father a confident look, and said it didn't matter that his magic wasn't sharp, because he still had his sword, and his father nodded along to that ironclad resolve. He pressed on, shouting that he had his very own special power, the demon god style of swordsmanship. His father, grinning at the boy's wild spirit, declared it was time to head out and claim the place where his brand new sword was waiting. For a second, he wondered if he'd mastered the style himself, then he shrugged it off and moved on. The crew rolled up before a massive, rock-solid building with a tiled roof, right in the heart of the swordsmith's workshop. His father pounded the wooden door and yelled a greeting, but the house stayed silent, no answer at all. So fear started to creep in that maybe they weren't home. A raging shout burst from inside, demanding they scram, but his father didn't even blink. He declared, "I'm Baron Garandranger," and explained that the master once forged a sword for him. The door blasted open, and a young woman in a smith's apron strode out, hair pinned back, hammer in hand, govels shoved up on her forehead like a dare. And she told them straight-faced that the old man was dead, she was in charge now, and they better scram. His father froze in stunned silence, and the woman, Fry, the old man's daughter, stepped up, told him she was leaving, and started to shut the door. He blurted out that she had it wrong because he'd come to deliver the sauce. She glared him down, calling him a snob and nothing but a stuck-up noble brat, then snapped that he should run off and beg his daddy to buy him some toy sword or whatever. That heavy wooden door slammed shut with a thunderous boom, trapping Sword, his father, and Tilty out in the cold, while Sword let out a tired sigh, realizing the quest to snag that crucial weapon was going to be anything but easy. He whips around to his father, eyes blazing, and insists he's going to try again, this time for real. But his father hesitates, still stuck on the shock of it. The master's daughter already took over. He pushes them to track down a different smith, even as he admits they might not find one who can match his skill. The boy insists, "It's fine, I just need to talk to her properly." Then Tilty snaps, "I'll stay with your father," and Sword grins, "All right, I'll scout around while you wait." As he and Tilly stride back toward the workshop, she quips that the guy must be terrifying, so why does he want to talk to him? He just smirks and flips it back on her. Did she notice what was lurking in the back of the room? He tells you exactly what snagged his attention. An ugly-looking display of swords that, at first glance, looked rough, rugged, and downright clumsy. That's exactly why he storms back into the workshop, where Fry is pounding her anvil, and snaps that those swords are the whole reason he has to talk to her. With his sudden burst into the room, Fry snaps, demanding who gave him permission to barge in. Tilt blurts, "Sword," in a shaky voice, but Sword pretends she didn't hear it, and Tilt turns straight to the smith to deliver his request. Her furious glare snaps onto what he's offering her, just a tiny, shattered sword hilt, broken to pieces. He slams the broken weapon down and begs for a blade, one powerful sword that refuses to snap, no matter how hard he swings it. Her face twists with disbelief and sharp irritation as she fires back, demanding to know what his deal is. Then Sword snaps up and introduces himself, claiming he's doing all of this to protect his sister. That's when a memory slams into his mind about Lord Mobius asking if this was the smith who'd thrown him out, and Sword's own memory confirms it. Those words slam into Fry like a hammer, yanking her back to that brutal day when Lord Mobius, backed by the noble Lord Warga, charged into her workshop, roared her name in front of everyone, and demanded a sword forged on Lord Warga's orders, right this instant. The memory hits Sword and she jerks with a gasp in the present, while Fry throws her hands to her head, spitting in frustration about how it's been a cursed day. Like disaster won't stop stacking up, and Tilty just watches, her eyes full of worry. She remembers planting her feet and staring them down, her voice iron stable as she repeated her one truth. She will never forge fancy weapons for nobles. Lord Mobius slapped down the truth. Her old man really did forge a sword for Lord Warga, and Fry just lets that sink in as he quietly confirms it. Then Mobius spills the ugly reason. Warga had threatened him, coldly asking if he even cared what happened to his daughter. The Sword and Tilty are left reeling in pure shock. This memory crumbles into something far older, her master drilling her, day after day, teaching her to forge, until she can still hear him say his philosophy is. His voice keeps echoing in her head, stern, burning with passion, because he's warned her. Never forge those fancy swords made just for looks, shaped to flatter her, not to fight. A sword isn't a decoration, it's forged for battle. She watches her younger self sitting there, as he delivers his life's biggest lesson. Forge the sword you believe in, or you'll end up like him. Fry remembers he kept repeating those words, feeding his power every day, right up until the day he died, still grinding away at his forge. Back in the present, a tear streaks down her face as his sacrifice finally lands, heavy and real, because he'd done everything for her, and it was his choice that pushed her to make her own. With a massive smithing hammer in hand, her grief ignites into pure steel. She swears she's inherited her old man's convictions, and blasts out that she'll forge only swords made for real battle. Fry dug her heels in, and then the intimidating warrior Mobius stepped up to the two kids, sword in hand and that smug tilt on his face. He smirked, started lecturing them, and told them the sword was nothing but an ancient, outdated relic. In this magic-crazed age, he went on, swords aren't true weapons anymore. They're just stand-ins for magic staves or flashy toys for nobles, because even 100 blades will still crumble before the punch of one lone mage. His words crashed back like a hammer on the threat he'd just thrown at Fry, reminding her that Lord Warga prized her inherited skill, and that all she had to do was start forging. Then he leaned in and asked if she wanted her own taste of intimidation too, sealing the point that nobody's really chasing swords for real combat anymore. The boy couldn't take it anymore. He stepped forward fast, fists tight, and yelled at Mobius to stop. He locked eyes with the warrior and the smith, jaw set like a promise, and called out that the one who didn't need a sword for battle was standing right there. Moby smirked at the boy's nerve, while Fry stared, totally stunned. The warrior snapped back at that challenge. No talk, just a lightning-fast, brutal backhand, and the impact whipped his sword skidding across the workshop floor while Tilty screamed his name in pure terror. He slammed down hard, wheezing through pain, and cursed himself for dropping his guard, while Fry just stared, frozen in stunned silence, as Mobius towered over the boy, growling that he'd kill him unless he watched his mouse. When her friend got threatened, Tilty snapped into courage. She pushed right in front of that massive warrior and begged him to stop hurting her big brother. Her pleading flipped in an instant, tears spilling down her face as she snapped, defiantly, that she'd never forgive anyone who dared to hurt her brother. Her defiance only stoked Mobius' fury. He surged forward, grabbed the little girl, and hoisted her into the air as she screamed. "You and I too," he snarled, and Fry just stood there watching, her face hard as she clenched a smithing hammer. She gripped a hammer while the sword fighter fought to his feet, then slammed his blade down steady as stone, pointed straight at the armored warrior, and barked for him to let Tilty go, while Fry and Lord Warga just stared, blown away by the boy's nerve. He shifted his weight, clamping both hands on the massive blade as he steadied himself on the hill, muscles coiling tight, ready to launch into action even with his small frame. His eyes tightened into a razor-thin slice of steel, and he barked his demand again with cold, unstoppable finality. "Take your hands off my sister." Fry's declaration hit like a thunderclap. He snapped in fury, demanding why she was handing her sword to him, while Mobius leaned down with a cold sneer, clenched around a crying Tilty, and warned the boy he had no idea how deadly his move really was. The giant warrior roared as a fireball started to gather in his open palm, and he vowed that even if they killed the boy for his insolence, he would. He had zero right to complain, so he snapped and fired that blazing projectile. Tilty shrieked in terror, but Sword didn't move at all, just stood there ice calm, because he could feel it. He replayed that fateful day in his head, the moment Fenrir's power finally woke up inside him. It surged through his body like a wild storm, raw, untamed energy tearing awake inside him. As the fireball tore through the distance, ready to scorch him, a cold snap swept over the boy's skin. He let out a thunderous roar, then swung his sword boom. A brutal wave of freezing energy tore forward and crystallized into a charging wolf. "Ice wolf slash," he screamed. A brutal icy blast slammed into Mobius' arm, freezing it into a thick block of frost in an instant. Then the massive man erupted in a furious roar, gaping at his ruined limb in sheer disbelief, trying to figure out what kind of sword could hit that hard. When Mobius recoiled, the sword didn't budge 1 inch. Its blade burned with cold energy, shouting in plain sight, "Power is the point of this sword." He clutched the sword hilt, his young face blazing with fierce resolve as he watched Fry and Tilt, stunned by the boy's sudden transformation. For Sword, this wasn't just a duel anymore, it was pure power to protect what mattered most. His sudden power bulldozed the enemy and sent them scrambling back, and Lord Warga snarled curses as he bolted, yelling at Mobius to chase him. The big warrior could only choke out a grunt, clutching his frozen arm in agony as he retreated. After another brutal battle, Tilty came sprinting toward the older Sword, her face glowing with relief and gratitude. She wrapped her arms around him and kept thanking him non-stop, and he held her steady, asking if she was okay. She lit up and told him he'd pulled off that same insane move again, and it hit Sword like a spark. His eyes narrowed as the pieces finally started clicking into place. He replayed 2 sharp memories, standing toe-to-toe with a savage wolf to shield Tilty during that Mobius showdown, and in both moments the power flared up. With a bright, knowing grin, Tilty dropped the last piece. Activating his demon god style was easy, he just had to be helping her. Then the twist hit, and it came with a brutal price. Back in the workshop, Tilty snapped in panic that his sword had shattered, and Sword took one look at the shatterblade and said a plain blade just couldn't survive the sheer wrecking power of his demon god style. He and Tilty stood there, squirming in front of Fry, and she stared down at them with her arms crossed, pure, sharp displeasure on her face. With a sword in hand, she held up the broken health like proof that yet another weapon had been destroyed. He and Tilty whip into a frantic bow, begging forgiveness for breaking Frey's sword, but the smith just turns away cool as ice, and shocks them by saying it's fine, then promising she'll forge a brand new one for him. That phrase jolts a memory of her master, standing over his anvil, hammer striking metal, drilling into her that a sword isn't just steel, it's power, power to fight, and power to never betray the truth of your own beliefs. The memory snaps to him, standing there like a blade about to be drawn, pure conviction blazing in his eyes, because for someone like him, guarding what matters runs deeper than blood, and that means the right sword has to be forged. Back in the present, Fry stares down at the 2 kids and makes a vow. She'll forge a sword so powerful it won't shatter, not even when he's the one holding it. Her face hardens with resolve as she flashes a confident thumbs up and vows that she Fry will personally forge it for him. Sword and Tilty stare up at her, and hope lights their faces bright. Then he whispers her name, because he finally gets it. She's going to forge a blade that can take the full blast of his demon god style. She grins warmly and tells him to ditch the honorifics, just call her Fry. Sword beaming with joy, he thanks her again and again, swearing that with a blade like this, he's about to get even stronger. Meanwhile, in a glittering mansion, Lord Warga explodes, furious that Mobius lost to a mere kid, and slams the door on him, roaring that he can't even tolerate excuses. Mobius tries to fight back, claiming that Sword isn't just an ordinary boy, but Warga cuts him off mid-sentence. Warga lounges at the table with smug satisfaction, and his newest muscle, sporting a mohawk, stands right beside him. When he spots the silver-haired girl, he smirks and confirms their targets are exposed, then leans in like, "All right, now it's getting good." A sharp cry of disbelief rips through the swordsmith's workshop. The cry comes from Sword himself. He's panicking, shouting that he can't forge it at all. So Fry leans in, his face full of worry, and asks, "Why can't you make it?" From her spot on the workbench, she calmly says it again. She's already told him she can't make it right away. The smith kicks off by breaking down what he did at the root, showing how some techniques shove magic through a sword, treating it like a staff, then simply wrapping it in an element, like the moment he swallowed his blade in ice. She spells out the difference, because this isn't just swordsmanship coating steel. He reshapes the blade itself into magic, forging it into a weapon of pure ice and unleashing his technique. Fry holds up the shattered hilt and tells her the truth. This insane power always demands payment, and her sword was never built to survive this kind of brutality. He demands an answer from Fry, and she flashes a grin. It's simple. They've got to hunt down materials that can survive his power, and then she remembers what her old master once warned her about, a special stone from another world. She digs deeper into the legend, talking about a whole world bursting with magical power, where demon beasts roam in a place called the Demon Dimension, and that's where magic is forged into someone who can survive any kind of power. Later, at the table with Sword's father, the moment he hears the material's name, Magistone, shock hits so hard he spits his drink all over the place. As the coughing fit finally eases, Sword jumps in. "Are you okay?" His father locks eyes with Sword and Tilt, face hard, voice serious, admitting that getting an item like that is going to be a brutal uphill battle for them. The talk kept ripping into one brutal truth. The material they needed was insanely valuable and impossibly scarce. Magistones don't just sit on store shelves, they're locked away. One tiny fragment can cost millions, dwarfing the price of any jewel. With a grim face, he admitted straight up that getting one right now felt impossible, then swore he'd chase every single option, no matter what. Sword listened as he remembered Fry's warning too. This was going to be brutally hard to get. Later that night, the boy couldn't stop thinking, his mind sprinting in circles, as he recalled the Magistone and realized that even inside the game world, Noblesse Fantasia, it was an absurdly rare prize. Lying in bed, he kept staring at that brutal gap between his game world and real life, because in the game, he'd rake in wins just by hunting demon beasts, but here it was a whole different nightmare, and he was left totally lost for what to do. Just as his mind started to drift, a gentle voice came from the next bed. Tilty whispered that she truly hoped he'd manage to get the Magistone, and Sword snapped his head around to acknowledge her. She stared at him with wide, honest eyes, cheeks just barely blushing, then blurted out a heartfelt "thank you" all over again, because after saving her, he was officially the coolest guy ever. With a tiny giggle, she waved him off and whispered, "Good night." Her heartfelt praise froze him for a second, then a shy blush crept onto his cheeks as he flopped back onto his pillow. Under the full moon's cold glow over that quiet town, his resolve turned to steel, because no matter how villainous his cute little sister might be, he'd push through every hardship and make it happen. His grit got a turbo boost from one promise. He still remembered splitting from Fry, who thrust his repaired sword into his hands and swore she'd be waiting, because he'd promised her he'd deliver the Magistone the very next day. Once their business in the capital was done, Sword, his father and Tilty climbed into a horse-drawn carriage and rattled back towards Soldier Village, the road kicking up dust behind them. Inside the carriage, Sword's father snapped into an apology, swearing they'd missed the chance to grab the sword right away, even after that brutal long trip. Sword just smiled, shaking it off, telling him not to stress, and making it clear he was relieved they now had the next step figured out. His father then turned to Tilty and asked if she'd finally managed to calm down a bit. She met him with a soft smile and nodded, saying yes, while Sword stared inward and realized that even after all the mess, they'd still checked off the sword acquisition as a goal, and their plan was moving like clockwork from a strategy standpoint. Their peaceful ride got ripped apart when an ambush hit. Out of nowhere, a huge mohawk-sporting thug named Dogora burst in, flames igniting in his palm as he roared, "Attack the carriage." The attack's chaos dissolves, and a quiet path of force stretches ahead. Dagora strides forward like he's got a mission, tilting an unconscious child over his shoulder as if it weighs nothing. Meanwhile, in the shadows, a hidden watcher freezes, stunned by the truth. That kid is carrying an insane darkness power. His quest grinds to a stop inside a lavish room, where he drops to his knees before Lord Warga. Dagora shoots his master a sharp question. So this dark power is really what they're chasing. When Warga confirms that it's the Titan's true goal, everything clicks into place. Wargard points at a glowing orb sitting on a pedestal, and the air turns heavy as he says it holds a power so terrifying it could swallow the world. Then he shocks everyone by revealing that this force is tied to a specific person. From the dark shadows, a new figure steps out, this man in a sharp, bird-like mask. Then with a confident smirk, he points the spotlight straight at her, the priestess of darkness. He slams a furious stare onto Warga, snarling that he botched the job twice. First he murdered her mother and she still slipped free, then he tried again with help from some guy named Finna, and she vanished again anyway, and now panic makes sweat pour down Warga's face. His voice drops like a blade, and then he commands without mercy, third time's the charm. He orders Warga to bring her to him and dangled a promise. If he succeeds, he'll be rewarded with a blessing of dark power. Warga's face twists with terror and hunger as he stammers, swearing he'll grab her no matter what. Tilty jolts awake with a sharp gasp, and the title hits her like a bell in her head, Priestess of Darkness. She wakes up in a strange forest, her body thrown over Bandit Dagora's shoulder, and he growls that if she wants to live, she better stay silent. Then panic claws up her throat, and she blurts out what happened to her father and brother, only for Dagora to hit her with the coldest truth. They're dead. That devastating news smashes into her like a wrecking ball, and she breaks into heart-ripping sobs, until Dagora's face twists with rage and he snaps for her to shut up. Her eyes fly wide with pure terror and hopeless despair. In that crushing wave of sorrow, something wild ignites inside her. Then black tendrils rip up from the ground, spiraling around them like living shadows. Dagora jerks back and screams, "What in the world happened?" As power surges through everything, Tilty screams, convinced her very presence spells doom for everyone around her, while Dagora just gapes in stunned disbelief at the chaos erupting in front of them. The darkness finally breaks free, Tilty rockets upward, and that raw power pours into Dagora like a storm, surging through his veins until dark patterns crawl over his skin, both unbearable and wildly exhilarating. Dagora roars as the transformation takes hold, and Tilty hangs right at the eye of a spinning energy vortex, while Dagora declares the power of darkness is the strongest there is. From a distance, Sword stares at the nightmare unfolding, and then it clicks. He clenches his blade, realizing Tilty's darkness doesn't just hide power, it boosts it, and that's exactly why they're hunting her. Dark energy sharpens his senses, and then the transformed Dagora whirls around and locks onto him. Maniacal laughter bursts from his mouth as he demands, "Why is the sword here?" He plants his feet and demands answers about Tagor's man, grim determination burning in his eyes, admitting that he let his guard down before, but now he's ready to throw down. When he stared down that monstrous man, the memory of his father's crushing defeat slammed into his mind, because there beside a cart in the dust, his swordsman dad lay sprawled, already slipping away, thinking only that he never stood a chance against a charge this reckless. Amid his fallen comrades, his father's resolve hardened even as he drifted unconscious, and a silent vow snapped into place in his mind: he would show no mercy. That same scorching fury blazed in Sword's eyes. Tilty's terrified face snapped into the background, and with a fierce grin in hand, he swore it out loud. No matter who or when they came for her, he'd slice them down. The transformed Dagora faced that resolve with a thunderous laugh, and Tilty's dark energy siphon whipped around him like a raging storm, as he bragged that Mobius was right, because Sword wasn't just some ordinary kid. The monstrous man jerked his arms wide, muscles swelling as he roared at the boy, warning him not to underestimate his power. His face twisted into a grotesque grin as he finally spoke the truth, claiming the priestess of darkness for the Titans, promising they'd keep her, and that she'd be treated well. Sword's face went stone cold as Tilty screamed in agony, her dark power getting ripped out of her with brutal force, while Dagora erupted into maniacal laughter, praising her like she was the ultimate performance booster. He taunted the boy, claiming he'd just burn out and quit in the struggle. Then Sword dug in, stood his ground, and kept his blade ready at his side. Then bam, he shot forward in a blink, and his blade carved the air as a razor-bright silver streak. The hit landed, and the transformed man's gigantic frame jolted with a hard, instant tension, muscles snapping tight as he took that surprise blow. He stumbles back, his monstrous body fizzing with raw energy, then he gapes down in disbelief as those swords slam into him and the blades shatter, boom, like thunder in the air. Power rips through him, and it turns on him, twisting his body until it buckles in brutal pain. He howls like he's drowning, screaming for help with a desperate, pleading stop. He stares at the damage from his attack, face locked in cold control, no wavering. Sword leans in and finally explains what he meant. He promised he'd never forgive anyone who dares threaten Tilty, then drops the name of his move, Frostfang /*. With the threat finally crushed, the spinning sphere of darkness that had trapped Tilty starts to unravel, collapsing in on itself as it echoes between the barren trees. He locks onto the fading energy, extends his hands with a calm, steady look, and as his blade sings, he tells Tilty, "Everything's fine now, come here." In the pitch black, her tear-soaked face bursts into view, choking up with pure relief. She throws her voice out and cries, "Tilty's calling you, big brother." She rockets out of the last scraps of her prison, hurling herself straight into a storm of blades, landing in outstretched arms like a desperate leap of fate. He grips her tight and makes a solemn vow. No matter how terrified or powerless she feels, he'll always be there, ready to rescue her. He tenderly combs his fingers through her hair, begging her to keep darkness from taking control, while Tilty keeps sobbing, clinging to comfort in his touch through. Choked up on tears, she squeezes out a heartfelt thank you to her big brother, and just clings to him, apologizing for what she put him through as she's forced to endure it. He cradled the unconscious girl in his arms, the cracked earth glaring like evidence of their brutal fight. And just like before, Tilty couldn't take any more, dropping into another knockout before anyone could stop it. His face hardens, and that youthful look tightens into grim determination, straight up forged by the fight. Just as his thoughts start to swirl, 3 towering armored figures crash into view, halting everything at once. Dagora's power gets them talking fast, praising a brutal one-hit technique meant to drop him with a single strike, and it zeroes in on the power of darkness itself. Dagora jerks his head up, startled by their arrival. The Central Knight stared at the chaos, then declared who they were, Hartman family envoys, while the sword's raw power began rattling the whole world. Tilty held tight as Sword snapped, demanding to know what was happening. Then the envoy finally explained it all. They were here to escort Sword, the son of the Ranger family. Young Master Sword, heir to the Ranger family, stands face to face with 3 armored envoys, and when they speak, you learn his bloodline is one of the 2 noble houses that hold the town of Gas in its grip. Fresh from the forest, they stumble into the Hartman estate, where a man behind a desk looks up and greets the Sword by name. He shot a hand to his chest and declared, "I'm Rake Hartman, the head of House Hartman." Then he grabs Sword's attention and reassures him. Don't worry, his father and that rescued girl are both in the hands of a doctor, and right there nearby, the girl rests in a bed. Even with all those comforting words, Sword can't shake the feeling that something's wrong. One bead of sweat rolls down his temple as his mind races. He remembers that in the game world of Noblesse Fantasia, Rake Hartman is one of the biggest names, one of the central figures. Sword locks onto a game-changing detail from the plot, and Rake soon turns into the villain's worst enemy. That truth lands on his chest like a punch. He thanks Rake for saving them, but the real shock hits in his head. Why is this character, who isn't supposed to show up until way later, crashing the story right now? He rips his suspicions straight to the armored knights, grilling them on why they're prowling that forest and how they somehow hit the perfect moment. Because last he checked, their mission was to retrieve him. Behind his desk, Rick Hartman sits while the knights line up at his sides, listens in silence, then calmly nods and says that the sword has just raised a big question. His thoughts spun like a hurricane. He'd heard of Rake Hartman from the game, a ruthless tactician, the kind who didn't lift a finger out of pure goodwill. He stared at the chain of chaos and realized one simple act, protecting Tilty, had flipped everything. It rewrote the timeline where his family once died, turning Tilty into a villain who's set to clash with Rake at the academy. But in this new world, his family lived, and Rake showed up before Tilty even grew up, completely breaking the original story. Sword stared at those two paths for a heartbeat, then snapped his eyes back to the man in front of him. So tell me, what is Rake really hunting for? Rake read the boy's thoughts like a mind map, then snapped into action. His house had been tracking Dogora, and that scoundrel's blade had already crushed the sword, shocking it, so hard the truth landed completely out of nowhere. He kept going, laying it all out. Dagora ran the town's underworld, tied up in smuggling, human trafficking, and every other filthy operation imaginable. Rake finally admitted it. He tried time and again to haul the man in, but every single attempt died in its tracks because Dagora fought back with brutal, unstoppable power. Then he finally tore the curtain back. Warguard Debulp, the Debulp family's head and the town's co-ruler with House Hartman. Hearing the name, Warga hit like a blade to the chest. He instantly remembered that terrifying man who'd threatened his father and demanded a sword be forged for him right then. Rake's voice sliced through the past. He painted Warga as a total scoundrel who treated the townspeople like nothing but fuel for his greed. Yet he hated that there was still zero hard proof tying him directly to Dagor's crimes. Suddenly it all clicked. One of the Hartman's envoys snapped out that everyone knows Warga's a bastard, only to get cut off fast when another man growled that, yeah, everyone knows, but no one can act. He stared straight at the man across from him, armored guards looming on both sides, and then he dropped a bold claim. Rake Hartman's ultimate mission was to bring Lord Warga crashing down. With that direct accusation hanging in the air, Rake's eyes flashed sharper behind his glasses, his face perfectly unreadable as his retainers stood by in deadly silence. The boy pushed forward, lining up his big theory. Rake had been tailing the criminal Dagora non-stop, hunting for hard proof that he was tied to Warda. A soft smirk curled across Rake's lips as he finally gave in, admitting that his sword assessment was dead on and seriously impressive. Then he started laying out the town's fragile political tightrope. Hartman and Debulp looked like they ruled in perfect peace, but underneath, both families bided their time, ready to strike at the first crack in the other's armor. As he kept talking, his voice hit harder and harder. He swore the Hartman family had grown right alongside Gast, called the people their true treasure, and vowed they'd never let Warga crush them just to feed his own selfish greed. Sword leaned in, sizing the man up again, because he remembered that Rake from the game world, a sarcastic nightmare with zero mercy, and this guy was nothing like it. A passionate young man, shouldering the pressure of his whole house, totally flipping everything Sword thought he'd see. Then the vibe snapped into place when Rake fired a question. Was the Dagora sword really what crushed the one targeting his sister? The sword answered, yes, and before he could even breathe, it added the killer detail. Dagora said he belonged to an organization called Titans. The moment Rake heard the name, his face snapped into hard understanding. Yeah, I figured, he murmured, sealing the doubt in my mind, and Sword stared at him in shock as the armored knights on guard burst out, stunned, shouting the Titans' name. He spilled details about a mysterious group, Titans, a rumor-backed shadow organization that's tied to dark deals happening all over the world. Nobody knows who they really are when they started, or how they pull their moves. The name is the only thing you can hold on to, because even their symbol, a strange, weeping eye, feels like a warning wrapped in mystery. He finally spills his years-long gut feeling. Lord Warga is tied to the Titans, and he's betting Warga will use his sister to forge that link even tighter. He swore it wouldn't happen, because if that alliance took hold, the whole town would crash into chaos, a wave of violence rolling in while Warga and his enforcers tightened their grip, and the darkness spread even deeper. That's why he swings the sword of his family forward with a proper, formal request. And the sword, realizing this visit has one real purpose, immediately demands what he's planning. That talk crashes into your brain, replaying the old bloodshed, Dagora and Mobius tearing through the streets in a full-on rampage, while a terrified young Tilty gets trapped in the wreckage. In that memory, Tilty's mother screams at her to run, fighting to buy seconds, while Tilty clings to her, sobbing, begging, I don't want to leave. Her mom's voice cuts through the air, screaming that a terrifying darkness is stalking her daughter. She admits that this darkness will bring pain, but she wipes away the tears and promises the kid, softly, firmly, that everything will be okay. She drops a prophecy like a bomb. One day, a blazing light will show up and shatter it for good. Clutching onto that hope, she fires one final instruction at her daughter. No matter how brutal it gets, she's got to keep pushing forward. The memory jolt slammed her awake in bed, and she jerked with a gasp, then screamed for her mother into the empty room. She jolts awake, totally lost in a strange room, and an elderly maid slips into view at her bedside, smiling softly as she tells her, "You're awake and you're safe here, inside the Hartman family estate." Still half asleep and wrecked with panic, she first reaches for her family, yelling for her father, then demanding where her big brother's sword went. The maid calms her down, saying her father is resting and okay, but the sword is busy right now, talking with Lord Rake, the man who runs the whole house. The moment she hears sword, Tilty's gut drops with realization. Her mother's words come roaring back, that a light would rise to shield her no matter what, and she suddenly launches from the bed, crashes through the nearest door, and shouts for a big brother. Her sudden burst into the room snaps the formal meeting in half, right when Rake Hartman stands before the sword and declares that House Hartman wants to take Tilty under their protection. In the same breath, both Sword and Tilty freeze, and Tilty blurts out, "What's happening?" Rake whips around and tells her straight up, her father needs rest, and he's been talking it over with Sword. Then he drops the real reason behind his plan. Marquis Warger is going after Tilty, but the motive is still a complete mystery. He doubles down, warning everyone about the nightmare Warger is, because as a high-ranking noble, he can rig charges at will, and he won't just crush Tilty. He'll wipe out the entire Ranger village too. The threat's weight hits like a punch in the gut. Sword and Tilty lock their eyes ahead, terror and worry carved across their faces, while the armored knights behind them stand stone still, watching in deadly silence. With the stakes fully exposed, Rake straightens up and makes his offer, out loud, no hesitation. If you're going to battle a man backed by Warger's power, House Hartman won't stand aside. They'll give you sanctuary and protection. He doubles down on his intentions, making it crystal clear. This proposal isn't only for Tilty's sake. It's a full-on shield meant to protect every single person in Ranger Village who lives right beside her. Tilty tilted her chin up toward the blade, her voice trembling as she shouted his name, yet he kept staring straight ahead, face tight with grim, torn-up resolve, silently bracing himself under the brutal weight of the choice in front of him. He clocked the whole act. Rake Hartman's kind offers weren't kindness at all. They were a trap, meant to muscle Lord Warger into losing control. The boy clocked the political chaos in an instant, and for Warger, Tilty was the absolute nightmare. The girl he was fighting for ended up in his rival's hands, under House Hartman's custody. That power move would freeze Warger in his tracks. If he wanted Tilty untouched, he couldn't flail around against the Hartmans. While Warger's hands were tied, Rake would be free to strike with full boldness. A grim realization hit him hard. Tilty was just a bargaining chip, and that man couldn't be trusted. Below them, Tilty looked up, wearing pure innocence on her face, trapped in a game she didn't even know she was playing. He weighed his two brutal choices. Either leave her with Rake, safeguarding her but tearing them apart, or step in and try to shield her himself with his own power. His hands snapped into a tight fist, because he had to pick the road that would make Tilty happiest, and that choice was final. With his thoughts finally steady, he dropped into a deep bow before Rake and accepted the offer on the spot, then begged him, with real urgency, to please take care of his sister. Rake leaned in and promised her that House Hartman would guard her with their lives, tears spilling from her eyes as she choked out why her big brother was walking away. Then she spotted the sword in his hand, looked up, and he said he had just one condition. His somber face vanished in an instant, swept away by bright, earnest resolve, and he didn't beat around the bush. "Please hire me, I want to work here." That sudden demand slammed the Rake into silence, sweat beading and sliding down his face. And even Tilty's father and the rest watching couldn't find a word after the kid's outrageous proposal. His sword's declaration hung in the air, because his reasoning was locked to one warm, heartfelt memory, until T's bright, smiling face lit up his mind as he swore to make a promise. He can still see it like it just happened, Tilty lunging into his arms in pure gratitude, him flashing that confident wink, while Rake Hartman and Warguard de Bill watch from right there. Ray lets out a faint smile, repeats the vow under his breath, "Protect your sister," and swears, "Yeah, I'd protect her no matter what." Once the choice was made, he pivoted to the portly noble and declared, "All right, then, I'll hear your proposal," leaving August stunned into a sudden burst of discussion. He rephrases his words for Sword and Tilty, and with my sister watching, their faces flip from hope to full-blown confusion, like everything just got twisted. Later, beneath a full moon outside the Grand Hartman estate, Rake swings open the door and offers you both a place to stay, just until your father comes back to himself. Sword, even though he hesitates at the awkwardness of it all, still bows his head and thanks him. He strides into a dazzling bedroom, breaks at the door, and there, inside a canopy bed decked out with stuffed toys, sits a young girl. Saluria, he whispers. Saluria fired a question at her brother. Did you find the girl we're hunting? Ray shot back. Yeah, we've got her, exactly like you said. She's safe, and we secured her. With a calm snap of confidence, she explains exactly where she learned it, clairvoyance. It showed her a girl named Tilty, the one holding the key to House Hartman's prosperity. Drake locks eyes with his sister, relief floods his face. Yeah, I'm glad. Then his smile drops and seriousness hits hard as he says, but that's not all. He laid out the whole mess to his sister, Saluria, then told her about a noble boy who claimed he was Tilty's brother and asked to join their house. From her bed, Saluria fixed her eyes on the sword and on Tilty, quizzed him on whether Rake had spotted this guy too, and then said it straight. She had no idea who the boy was. I locked in, heart racing, as she spilled a shocking truth about the future. Through her clairvoyance, she'd seen it clearly. Boys simply didn't exist. Her words hung there like a warning, while the grand mansion sat silent beneath the full moon. Saluria swallowed it all and murmured that meant they wouldn't move forward, until a flash of doubt hit, and she suddenly snapped to her brother like a brand new idea just struck. Rake's thoughts echoed the weirdness around them. Something about that boy felt wrong, like his arrival had a purpose. And when Saluria finally spoke, she shook the room. She admitted she'd never once missed seeing someone in her visions before. Her eyes locked onto the boy in question. He just gave a soft, harmless smile, totally oblivious to the scrutiny, and the thought hit her like, is he special somehow? She couldn't stop thinking about what his presence would unleash. Would House Hartman rise to glory, or crumble to ruin? A hard look locked onto her face, and she silently swore she'd get the answer. Sword bursts out in pride, announcing his brand new station. He's become the garden trainer for the Hartman family, moving into their grand mansion and living right alongside Tilty. He whips around to thank his father, still stunned at how this all blew up. But his father gets it, nods, and promises he'll explain everything the right way to Sword's mother. His father kept going, laying it out like gospel. For a rural noble family, snagging ties to a powerful noble house was pure luck, and this was a huge break for both of them, just the spark that kicked off everything. And just like that, he shifted the conversation, and as soon as he mentioned magic stones, every sword perked up their ears. The boy got it in that instant. Magic stones don't just pass through the usual market, but a powerhouse marquee family could still snag one. And that hit him hard, because it dragged up memories of Fry, who'd sworn he'd forge the kid a brand new sword if he could just get his hands on a stone like that. He desperately needed a sword that could actually survive the brutal, demon god-level swordsmanship. Once he managed to lock a stone into a fresh blade, it hit him. He could crank his power even higher. Soon enough, the day of departure finally hit. Rake Hartman officially handed his sword and Tilty over to Lord Galen, and Sword's father took the charge with a solemn promise for Rake to have safe travels. Now that he'd finally carved out his new life, Sword marched beside Tilty through the mansion, eyes sharp as he weighed his mission. His job was simple: protect her at all costs. Sure, she could roam the estate, but the moment she stepped outside, danger snapped shut because Wolgir was hunting her. His duty stretched across her whole day, dragging her from garden games and bright entertainment to serious study sessions, and then to shared meals in the dining hall. He admits the last week felt smooth and easy, no real disasters, but one annoying problem keeps creeping back no matter what. Dread gnaws at him because someone won't stop watching. An entire week, a girl has been locked on him, and when he finally recognizes her as Saluria Hartman, the Rake's younger sister, he can't decide if he should risk talking to her. Before he can even make up his mind, Saluria bursts out of hiding, then strides straight to Tilty, and a startled blade snaps out, shouting Tilty's name in shock. Tilty doesn't flinch. She locks eyes with Saluria and demands to know why she keeps watching them, and as she speaks, a weird swirling pattern flickers in her gaze, while Saluria's face stays stone cold. Saluria snaps into action and yanks Tilty into a tight embrace, then flat out orders her to come to her room, leaving Tilty standing there, totally stunned. She yanks Tilty away, and Sword, completely blindsided, shouts for answers, screaming what's going on, but Saluria only cuts in that they need to talk as he watches them fade away, a calm voice creeps up from behind him, Rake. He leans in and tells Sword, don't worry. He rushes to apologize for his sister's reckless behavior, admits he can't rein her in, then begs the Sword to forgive her. Still totally baffled, the Sword blurts, what are you talking about? Rick plops down with his sword for tea and kicks things off by saying Saluria's power isn't just impressive. It's the kind of blessing that keeps the entire Hartman family protected. Rake digs into it, flat out confirming that this blessing has saved their family again and again, then admits he only hired a sword because Saluria herself gave him the go-ahead. Then it hits him, one vital memory snaps into place. Saluria isn't just a name, she's the Hartman family's guiding beacon. He figured it out from the game. Because her character was his guide, at the exact moment strategy fell apart, showing the one right path forward when it looked like everything was doomed. Her magic wasn't just strong, it was razor-precise clairvoyance, letting her peer into the future and see what's coming before anyone else. The shock of the revelation slams into him. Saluria's power is clairvoyance, just like her sister S in the game. He can't stop wondering what she's seeing right this second. Right nearby, Ray shoots in an apology, saying her sister's ability is a tightly guarded family secret. Meanwhile, across the manor, a huge bed groans under tray piled high with desserts, just waiting to be devoured. Saluria and Tilty sink into their seats facing each other, right in the middle of a sea of stuffed animals, while the sweets wait just for them in a lavish, sparkle-soaked room. Tilty, clutching a huge lollipop, hesitantly addresses her host, then Saluria waves it off like, forget the formalities, saying she finds all that stuff utterly annoying. Puzzled, Tilty blurts out, why did you bring me here? Saluria answers that she spotted Tilty chatting with a sword, then decided to drag her straight to her room, then swears with total confidence that whatever she sees is always the right move, leaving Tilty utterly stunned. A spark of understanding flashes across Tilty's face, and she admits in a soft voice that she's been doing the same thing all along, for her brother Rick's sake. Her eyes lock onto Saluria the moment it clicks. Same heart, same truth, and a calm, wordless understanding settles in the space between them. Saluria shoots Tilty a bright, knowing grin and blurts out the truth she just figured out. You love your big brother. Tilty's smile drops into something heavy. She confesses she loves her big brother and even his sword, but deep down she feels like she's just always dragging him into trouble. Little did they realize, Sword felt the same pull in his chest, and with quiet, unshakable resolve he vowed to help his own big brother too, just like Saluria. Back in the room, Saluria fixes Tilty with a calm, steady look and tells her it's fine. If she trusts the right feeling, she can do it. Tilty stares up at her, hanging on every word, trying to figure out what feeling even means. She admits she wished for it too, and that burning need lit the fuse, sparking her magic awakening. Her thoughts rocket back to childhood. She remembers slipping into daydreams, and how, when their parents were busy, her brother always stepped in, kept watch and helped her through. After their parents died in a tragic accident at the funeral, he didn't let go. He stayed her rock, pulling her into his arms and swearing he'd protect her and their home with everything he had. She remembers the warmth of his care, and it ignites something fierce in her chest. She has to help him back. So she pours her heart into it, and the moment she wants that power with everything she's got, her magic erupts, spiraling to life inside her eye. From that moment on, the future started leaking into her eyes as sharp fragments, and those glimpses let her rescue the Hartman family and her brother time after time. With a grim, steady stare, she explains that her clairvoyance never lets her predict when, how, or what she'll see, but every single vision, without exception, has always ended up helping her brother. She tells Tilty about that exact vision, how, even back when her brother was stuck in the southern forest of gusts, trying to save a girl from a mohawk-wearing monster, she got a warning back then too, and she speaks it out calmly while Tilty listens in silence. Her view wasn't the whole picture. She tells you she only caught a girl and Dagora, but she's certain her brother Sword was right there too. She keeps talking and then drops the bomb. Her power has a nasty limit, because even knowing he was there, her clairvoyance just wouldn't let her see swords materialize. Her eyes go distant and cold, and she admits it plainly. Since she's blinded, she has to decide for herself whether her brother is a friend or an enemy, and that single question hangs there, screaming her inner turmoil, because there's one person her power can't sense at all. The very next day, Sword and Tilty stride through the estate, and he realizes his sister isn't keeping eyes on them at all. Then Tilty quietly replays Saluria's words from last night, stuck on one terrifying detail: why her clairvoyance can't see the sword's future. Their calm stroll gets ripped apart when a panicked shout bursts from inside the mansion. Someone screams, "For my lady," and both Sword and Tilty freeze mid-step, thrown off by the sudden alarm. An older male retainer comes bolting down to Grant's staircase, panic carved all over his face, and he blurts out that the young lady is gone. Lady Saluria isn't anywhere to be found. The retainer shoots back that every single staff member is out hunting for her right now, so Sword doesn't even pause. He declares that he and Tilty will join the search for his sister immediately. While everyone else below screams in chaos, Saluria stands alone on the mansion roof, unshaken, because she already saw all of this, and it's playing out exactly the way she planned. Her vanishing act wasn't a mistake at all. It was the move she needed to make everything unfold. She doesn't hesitate, she just follows the road her visions carved for her. From the towering roof above, she leans out and steps right to the very edge. With a serene expression, she shuts her eyes tight and leans forward into the open air. Out of nowhere, a hand shoots in, clamps onto her wrist, and rips her back just before the fall, and right in front of her, Sword's face hardens in sheer shock like a mask. He barks out her name, demanding answers about what she's doing, and and Siluria whirls around, shocked that he just burst in like that. She tells him the future she saw, one where she'd be totally alone, then she braces to leap off the roof. In that vision, Sword was nowhere in sight, so she just carried out exactly what she'd seen before. Her calm words hit him so hard he couldn't speak. Down on the ground, Ray Cartman spots them and blares a full-on alarm. Then, as Siluria reels with the sword and the danger hits, she finally tells the truth. Every future she's ever seen was built to save her brother. He pleads, screaming that Rake would be crushed if anything happened to her, but she fires back that it's exactly what's needed for the right future. Sword fires back, yelling, "So what is this so-called correct future?" But she won't give a single word, just a stone-cold, unreadable look that says she's not backing down. Tears poured down her face as she snapped that the right future couldn't be built with swords. So what, we're just supposed to swallow it when the important ones sink into despair and stumble into tragic destinies. Fury hardened his face into a mask of pure determination as he roared his total refusal of her fatalistic belief. He declares that the future isn't meant to be accepted, it's something you forge with your own hands. Right in the middle of his words, he clamps down on her wrist and yanks her back from the roof's edge. His moves spark a sudden click in his head. He finally gets why Siluria couldn't see his future. Truth slams into his mind like a flash of crystal, because he's a reincarnator. In the original tale, Sword Ranger was supposed to meet death, and yet here he is, standing, breathing, alive. With this fresh clarity burning in his chest, he declares he's done with a scripted fate. He'll carve his own future. Then Rake and his attendants smash through the doorway and spill onto the roof behind him. From across the rooftop, Ray barks out Siluria's name, and in one breath his panic and relief collide. He lunges forward, yanks her into a crushing hug, and snaps that she's a fool. Then, pressed against his chest, Siluria whispers apologies and calls him brother, while the Sword and the attendant stand there watching the reunion hit like a punch. As Sword watches them, he steals a quiet breath and, deep in his own head, pours out heartfelt gratitude. He shoots his eyes up when Rake Hartman calls him out, and the instant he does, it's confirmed. He overheard the talk with his sister. Rake nods right along, ringing out that same Sword truth. The future isn't coming to them. They've got to forge it together, starting now. With that shared belief blazing in their hearts, Rake wastes no time. He steps up and officially invites Sword Ranger to serve the Hartman family, not as some trainee, but in a real, meaningful role, and Sword's eyes go wide at the sudden, huge offer. He accepts on the spot, grips Rake's hand hard, and tells him he'll gladly serve, then begs to drop the formalities and just call him by his first name. Rake stares at the young boy with raw, heartfelt gratitude, realizing he's not just a helper, he's the one who's truly saved his sister, and in turn, the entire Hartman family. The deal is barely sealed when an attendant barrels in, shouting for the young master, and the man's face lights up with pure relief. Thank God Lady Siluria is safe. His relief barely lands before urgent news slams in. He tells them Siluria's safety is just one problem, because a separate crisis has erupted. A rift has opened in the southern forest, and both Rake and Sword snap into shocked reaction. The news hits them all in totally different ways. Rake murmurs that the day has finally arrived, and you can hear the grim acceptance in his voice. Sword, though, stares at the same words like his past life is screaming in his head, wondering if rift means what it did back in the game. And then dread punches him, because the entrance linking their world to the Demon King's world has just appeared. Just like his worst fear, a colossal, jagged tear rips open the sky over the forest, and a dark, evil portal to the demon dimension has fully appeared. But while everyone else sees doom in the cataclysm, Sword clocks the opening. His grin hardens as he realizes the demon dimension showing up is their shot. Fry, the master swordsmith, sees his strategy reflected in her own sharp mind. She studies this demon dimension like it's a living engine, packed with demonic power and wild magic beasts, and she knows the real secret. It either breeds the rare magic you need or it can endure that power long enough for her to pull out the materials to forge magic stones. Sword tightens his focus on a belief forged in his youth. A blade is power, power that lets you protect what matters most. And that conviction turns into one blazing, urgent mission. He has to get a magic stone sword. He clenches his fist and hardens his gaze. An image of the Tilty starts to form behind him, and he vows it's not just about getting stronger, it's about taking control of the villain's future. The demon dimension isn't just another place. It's a whole other world, soaked to the core in mana, the lifeblood that fuels every single spell. Unlike the human world, this plane runs on the very same mana, feeding it and birthing a strange, alien ecosystem you've never seen before. Even though humans can safely tap modern mana for magic, go past your own tolerance and it turns deadly. Your head spins, nausea hits, and in the worst cases you drop dead. To dodge that deadly fate, Rake Hartman steps in and breaks it down. Reports say the demon dimension is packed with mana, so only him and a crew of elite soldiers with serious magical power will take the mission. He whips around to two of his armor guards, Zweig and Audrey, and demands, "You ready for this?" Then both of them roar, "Yes," in perfect sync. With their promises locked in, everything gets sorted. Captain of the Guard Aints has the mansion placed in his hands, Audrey swears his life to the Hartman family, and Zweig can't wait to dive into his job watching over his young master. While the adults hammer out their plans, Sword drinks it all in, his thoughts snapping back to the game's rules as lightning-fast flashes hit his mind. The demon dimension is packed with high mana, a wall you can't break unless you're level 20 or higher, just under. He snaps the pieces together in an instant, sweat beading on his temple as the truth hits hard, and with that kind of mana density, the danger skyrockets. Just as his internal alarm blares, Rake cuts in and speaks right to him, saying he'd never drag a child into the demon dimension, until he stops and mutters that Sword and the others are different. Sword freezes, staring back with eyes bulging in pure shock. Right before Sword even gets a chance to react, the Heartmonger guards slam their agreement in place. Zweig remembers how Sword wiped out Dagora with one brutal strike, and Audrey swears he felt a surge of raw magic bursting out of Sword's icy blade technique. Then Aints seals it with the verdict. Sure, Lord Sword can't cast magic himself, but his magic sword is still going to be an absolute game-changer. Ray Hartman hesitates, but still steps up and officially invites them. He admits the demon dimension is pure danger, then promises his help once his 3 elite guards give the nod, saying he wants to lend his sword to their fight and fuel their strength. With zero hesitation, he erupts into joy, flash a determined grin and shout, "I accept," because the demon dimension mission has him buzzing. He realizes, if he can grab magic stones from that world, he'll finally craft a sword tough enough to survive the demon god's brutal style of swordsmanship. Right before he heads out, his eyes lock onto Tilty, and he starts to worry aloud. But she cuts in with a gentle, unshakable voice, assuring him she'll be just fine. She tells everyone Saluria and the others will stand between her and danger. Aints, the guard captain, backs it up, he's already made a promise. Then Tilty fires back, swearing she'll never, ever lose. Facing the Sword and the gathered party, Tilty boldly declares what she wants. She's going to get stronger while he's gone. He locks eyes with her and flashes a confident smile, like a silent promise that they're both fighting for the same goal. The second the departure carriage rolls up, sword in hand Zweig, Rake and his armored guards in tow, stands in the doorway and waves goodbye hard, while Tilty, Saluria and Aints throw their hands back and shout their best wishes for the road ahead. A horse-drawn carriage tears the party away from the city of Gust, racing them toward the endless southern forest. The trail drives them deep into the ancient woods, where colossal trees slam together overhead to block out the sky, and that's when their real journey to the demon dimension finally begins. As he trudges through the forest with his crew, he fires off a question to Rake. Does a demon dimension show up this often? Rake admits it's his first time too, and he tells him those things hit without warning, like a natural disaster that nobody can predict. He keeps going, explaining that demon dimension rifts can pop up out of nowhere and then grow bigger every single day, until those expanding tears finally spit magic beasts into the human world. If they leave it alone, the Rake spits out a warning, and the land gets torn apart, putting everyone in deadly danger, so they have to wipe out the threat before it escalates. He slaps down a map to show the crisis's political chessboard. There's a demon dimension blown open inside the Hartman family's territory near Gust, right next to the lands ruled by the Deviship family. Sword snaps to it at once, realizing this whole disaster lands squarely on the Hartman family. Then he knows Warguard, Deviship won't let them breathe after failure like this. As a sneering Warga image flashes in Ray's mind, he locks onto Sword's fear, saying that if they fail, the Hartman family will be branded unfit to rule Gus for bringing a heart. Rake pushes forward and shifts the conversation, admitting that even with all that brutal trouble, the demon dimension's appearance still has one big upside: resources. He explains that these other worlds are packed with rare plants, magic beast materials, and ores you can't even dream of finding in the human world. So yeah, some nobles are actually begging for those dimensions to pop up, just so they can drain them for profit and fatten their fortunes. Rake snaps that any benefit only comes after you crack the dimension. Right then, 2 guards on the ridge shout for Lord Rake, say they've been waiting for him, and point the way ahead. With the scouts leading the way, the whole party slams to a stop, because right in front of them, the sky rips open with a thunderous crack, exposing a huge, shimmering, jagged tear in reality. The entrance to the demon dimension is. He stared at the barren, jagged rocks and felt something click in his eyes. Then the armored guard, Audrey, answered the question he didn't even dare to say, pointing out that this was the exact spot where Sword had beaten Dagola, and the knight couldn't believe the coincidence. A huge, brutal hole in the demon dimension throbbed right in front of them, like reality itself had split open, while a deep, guttural growl crawled out of the jagged tear. While the sword digested this chilling news, Rake piled on even more mystery. He said the frozen Dorgola had disappeared, and when the soldiers finally showed up, all they found was this rift. The boy's brows knotted with worry, wondering if it was really just a lucky coincidence. Zweig sensed the panic rising, stepped in fast, and reassured the young master, telling him to calm down, because everyone had already confirmed Dagola was dead, and that Lord Warga probably snatched the body back just to bury the whole mess. With everything settled for the moment, the crew traded quick, knowing looks, and Rake tossed out the final command, "Move out." They spun as one, sprinted straight for the shimmering portal, and with a single battle cry in their chests, they geared up to smash their way into the demon dimension. Far away from that brutal, desolate rift, Tilty and Celuria found a quiet, elegant room, and Tilty leaned in to whisper the truth. Her mother had warned her about a sinister power, a magic that wakes up all on its own whenever her emotions turn sour. Tilty confessed she's terrified because she can't rein it in. She blacks out, and every time it stirs, it drags bad luck straight onto the people she loves. She stared downward, and her voice cracked with pure despair. Then Celuria leaned in, listened close, and gently corrected her. Power isn't the curse, not by itself. It's what the one holding it decides to do that turns everything. To steady the younger girl, she opened up with a real memory. Celuria told her about the day her brother stepped in when her clairvoyance was crushing her, and how she'd been terrified too, because that weird power made her feel alone in a world where everyone else was different. Her face softened with empathy as she passed on the lesson her brother taught her. Any power can spell disaster if you misuse it, but handled the right way, it can light up your life with real, lasting happiness. She tells Tilty that her dark power, when wielded right, turns into pure happiness. Tilty's face lights up with fresh grit, and she vows she'll use her dark power to spread joy to everyone. The young girl clamps her fists tight, swears she'll grind through every practice and wrestle her fear into submission. Then she whips her head to Celuria, breaks into a grateful smile, and thanks her for the guidance while Celuria watches, quietly proud. Meanwhile, deep in the demon dimension, Sword lets loose the same fierce promise. He roars to bring happiness, then slams his sword down and leads the charge into that brutal, crystalline wasteland, right beside Rake and his guards. The young swordsman tears a path straight through a horde of shrieking, bat-demon beasts, as they dive down from the jagged sky and slam into them. As the boy glides with those sharp, fluid moves, Rake's jaw drops. His swordplay is unreal, like he's poured years into training just to reach this level. This fierce dedication to the sword was pure survival, because the sword couldn't use a match, so he had to commit to blade alone. As he keeps the pressure on, the Hartman guards rush to smash the other beasts, while Zweig rips a blazing water lance from thin air and skewers a cyclopean demon, and Rake can only stare, stunned. Audrey, his companion, comes in instantly, smashing yet another monster with a crushing rock hammer spell, and his wife shouts encouragement like she's cheering him on. Once the danger was gone, the guards sprinted to the side, scrambling to ask if their young master was okay, and when Sword caught the words "young master," his face lit up with shock. He strides up to the seated Rake, stares at the pale head of the family, and demands to know why he'd step into a place this dangerous. Then the man sinks back, apologizes, and admits he's in agony because he's suffering from antisickness. Rake just let the point stand, and he watched him with stunned disbelief. Then Rake made it clear. He never wanted to turn into some pampered lord who barks orders from a safe, guarded spot. He told me his father wasn't just any leader. He was a lord who charged at the very front with his sword up, rallying everyone in his wake. His bold courage magnetized people to him. Family was just the start. The townsfolk packed in too, cheering his father on and roaring for the Hartman family. In that dead, demon-choked dimension, Rake finally confessed. He'd been clinging to the sword he loved most, because it reminded him of his father, and he swore he'd become just like him. Then everything shattered. He told me how an accident ripped his parents away, leaving him to carry the family on his tiny shoulders, still just a kid, and he fought to keep a brave face so he could live up to his father's legacy. But he started doubting whether he even belonged there, because everyone around him was propping him up, and even Celuria, his sister, was the one helping him stand. He felt like he wasn't leading at all, just riding in the rear while his loyal guards shielded him like a wall. That crushing feeling of being pathetic finally snapped. He blurted out the truth, swearing he couldn't forgive himself for every weak moment, his hand tightening with raw frustration. He realized that even after stubbornly barging into the demon dimension, he was now a wreck, crippled by mana sickness and miles away from the strength his father had. But just as he started to dwell on it, Sword snapped his name out loud and swore his judgment was totally wrong. The boy snapped that everyone's weak, then dared to ask whether kid like him, no magic, just meant to be guarded, was doomed to be nothing, but he refused to buy that fate, swearing he can change and vowing to master swordsmanship. He clings to everything his training drilled into him. the lesson his father pounded into him under a relentless downpour, eyes burning with stern focus. And he realizes the real power isn't in force, it's in a believing heart. That conviction sparks a faint, steady smile as he tightens his grip on his sword. In the distance, like she can feel every word flying through the air, Saluria shuts her eyes and folds her hands in prayer, because she knows this kind of belief is exactly what forges a person into something unbreakable. Rake flips his swords around and sees it. This kid's power isn't magic, it's pure self-belief. The truth hits like a spark, and he quietly mumbles the boy's sword's name, locking it in with sudden understanding. He turns away, his voice low but unbreakable. Then he thanks the sword and vows to try to believe that even someone like him can become strong. Determination snaps into his eyes the moment he finishes speaking, because if he believes hard enough, he can grow into a proud man like his father. Sword breaks into a satisfied smile as he watches. Right as it got going, his guards burst back in. Then the moment his Swigan dry call echoed, their quick report snapped him straight back into leader mode. They say they found nothing worth noting. No lades, no surprises. Zweig steps in and insists it's nothing more than a plain, simply built demon dimension, with a single straight road staring them in the face. Rake seized the opening to teach sword, then explained that a demon dimension is a twisted rip in another world, like a warped miniature garden, and its shape changes every time it shows up. A guard jabs a finger toward a massive dome, shouting that the dimension's core is hiding inside it, and when Sword demands answers, Rake leans in and says, "That core, it's the demon dimension's heart." They figured out what kind of target they were dealing with. The demon dimension is born from its core, a single point where all magic energy gets crushed together and condensed. This core can take all kinds of shapes depending on the dimension: plants, magic stones, even magic beasts, and the only way to shut the dimensional rift down for good is to destroy it. With that in mind, Rake fired up his crew and said, "It's a simple demon dimension, so the core won't be much of a threat." Then he ordered them onward, steady and unshakable, while drilling into every one of them. "Don't you dare drop your guard." Right as they pressed on, a gigantic whirlpool of white energy tore out of the ground in front of them, swirling like it meant to swallow everything. Energy surged and condensed into a monstrous, serpent-like giant so massive it swallowed the tiny party in its shadow, crawling a car-sized path through the dead, barren land. They crash-landed into the empty void. Audrey peered around and saw no core anywhere, and Rake shook his head, saying it didn't look like a magic beast either. But Sword's eyes snapped wide with pure terror as he looked up and screamed, "Watch out." His scream tore through the crowd like a shockwave. Rake got slammed to the ground, staring up in pure disbelief, words tumbling out. "No way, that is." Towering over them, a gigantic dragon loomed. Its shadow swallowed the weird glow from that dimension. Audrey didn't hesitate. He barreled straight at that terrifying foe, sword blazing in his grip to guard his master, while Sword dug in and stood ready to crash the fight head-on. The beast answered their defiance with a bone-rattling roar that tore through the fabric of the dimension itself. The legendary black dragon's sheer size crushes the group's spirits. Rake's face turns paper-pale, terrified, wondering how they could ever wipe out a core that monstrous. Then the guards confirm the beast's identity. O'Dryan's white chimes in and Sword's voice slices through the panic, yelling at Rake to trust the plan. He plants his feet like a wall, grips his sword with both hands, and stares down his opponent, pure fire in his eyes, as he vows that no matter who stands against them, they'll win. Sword squares up with his crew against that monstrous foe, sword raised and ready to strike, and he roars a fearless vow. Whatever comes, they're walking out victorious. His eyes stay locked on the target, unblinking, weapon thrust out ahead like a promise carved in steel. Seeing that grit in his eyes, Rake's heart gets stirred, and he can't help but gulp as Firm's swords cut in, calling him young master, while Audrey's face hardens too, grimly agreeing that if the black dragon really is the core, then there's only one thing left they have to fight. Their enemy, the black dragon, looms right in front of them, all scaled and terrifying, radiating power so immense it feels like the air itself is shaking. The beast explodes with a deafening roar, and volatile energy starts churning inside its gaping maw. Then it rips loose a brutal torrent of black fire, an apocalyptic wave of destruction straight at that tiny group. With that crushing onslaught bearing down on them, the four companions braced, ready for the impact. Rake lunged his hand forward and screamed his spell's name. Boom. A colossal wall of water burst from the ground, slamming straight into the flames to stop them. But that magical barrier just couldn't take the dragon's fire. Rades yells in panic that his magic is breaking, and he orders everyone to fall back. The wall starts to evaporate. Audrey gapes at how savage those flames are, and right then Zweig gets swallowed by the fiery blast. Helpless, he can do nothing but stare as his sword watches his face twist in pure frustration, muttering a curse under his breath. He stared in pure terror as the dragons fire blasted Zweig straight into the inferno, and his scream got swallowed up by the flames. This hit him like a bolt of lightning. His power wouldn't just activate to save Tilty, it would activate to protect anyone he actually cared about, and with that steel-hot resolve burning in his chest, he tore into a brand new move, Ice Wolf Flash ***. That biting icy blast shredded straight through the flames, and snapped the black dragon shut inside a crystal prison of ice, and Audrey just stared, stunned speechless by the sheer terror of that sword's ice magic. Rake was swallowed by shame, fists clenched tight as he cursed himself for being so pathetic. While Sword struck decisively, fear had frozen him solid, he couldn't even move. His self-reproach didn't last, Sword blasted, "It's not over," and a brutal crack rang out as the black dragon surged in, while I snapped open from my icy shell. With a furious roar, the beast tore through its frozen prison, blasting massive shards of ice everywhere, and now it was free, with raw rage pounding off its every move. The dragon locked a glowing eye onto the small group, then snapped its jaws wide and sucked in power. Its chest growled low as it started lining up another deadly breath. Without a second thought, Audrey lunged forward, slammed his weapon into the ground, and hauled up a towering stone wall that slammed into the blast just in time, protecting his friends. Behind the barrier, Odrike swallowed hard and admitted they stood no chance against the beast, and Astrak barked that it was all under his orders. Then Sword cut in, saying the game makes it clear, there's no blessing in Fantasia. The black dragon was a brute of a threat, and Odrike knew it, but he still believed they could pull it off, as long as they went straight for its weak spot. He remembered from that game. The dragon's tough scales shrug off every weak strike like it's nothing, and brute force alone won't bring it down. He remembers the game's key trick, aiming straight at the reverse scale, right at the dragon's throat, and that's how he slams in massive damage. Rake finally clocks the target, but admits nailing it won't be simple, and Audrey warns that pushing past the dragon's scorching flames is going to be brutal. He whips around to Sword, demanding he land the deadly blow, and then Audrey declares it. He and Zweig will become decoys, throwing everything they've got behind Sword, even if the danger comes roaring for them. Sword agrees on the spot, but the steel in his eyes flashes. His smile comes with a hidden rule about his sword. He tells them every time he unleashes his special technique, his swords shatter, so they get one shot and one shot only. Sword agrees, this is it, they have to make this last strike count. All four of them lock in place, silent and tense, like their entire all-or-nothing plan is crushing down on their chests. Breaking the silence, his face rakes with pain, resolve hardens in his eyes, and he declares, straight to the point, that he wants to help too. His guards snap into protest, Sway blurts, "Young master," and Audrey fires back that it's not safe, not while he's insisting on doing this. But Rake doesn't budge. He stands his ground, admits the danger, and when he locks eyes on the sword, he declares, "I know the risks and I believe in him." Steel blades flash as the young nobles hold their trust steady, while his resolve hardens, pushing him to crash the fight. Rake vows to stand strong, and a grin bursts across Sword's face as he gladly accepts the results from his new allies. As the plan kicks off, Zweig blurts a sharp warning to Odrei. Right now, everything's about to go deadly, and the tank-like guard nods like he understands. Eyes locked straight ahead, he turns to Rake, the young master, and tells him with grim certainty that danger is already in their faces. With their challenge hanging in the air, the colossal dragon roars and blasts a brutal wave of destructive energy from its mouth, gouging a brutal trench straight into the rocky ground right in front of the tiny party. The two guards snap into action. Audrey slams his palms to the dirt, triggering a rock lock that traps the beast's legs, while Zweig whips up a raging water chain to pin its upper body. Their magic hits dead on, earthen spikes burst up and pin its feet in place, while watery tendrils clamp tight around the dragon's neck and snout, stopping its rampage cold for a heartbeat. The beast rips out a furious roar and thrashes like it's breaking free, while Audrey grits his teeth and strains with every ounce of strength to keep the magical restraints locked in place. He screams at his blade that this is it, confessing he can't keep that creature pinned for much longer, with the Rake at his side. Then Sword clenches his grip and yells back that he's ready to act. The young swordsman rockets forward with his blade outstretched, ripping through the distance in a blur to reach the frozen dragon. His gaze snaps to the one weak spot on the creature's chest, and he yells with cold certainty, proving he's zeroed in on a reverse scale. Right as he's about to strike, the dragon's huge, leathery wings tear open with a thunderous crack. With a brutal downbeat, the beast rips its bonds apart and rockets into the sky, leaving Rake and the guards staring in horror as their one shot evaporates, the dragon now flying out of reach. The beast hung over the sky like a trophy, its power utterly crushing everything beneath it. Down on the ground, Wraith slammed his fist shut in pure frustration, raging that he couldn't do a thing, while Audrian's Wige looked at the swords still holding their line, screamed that it was hopeless, and pushed him to run. But he didn't step back, he lifted his sword, and that look wasn't fear at all. It was quiet resolve as he stared down the airborne threat. That ironclad stance hit Rake like a memory slap, dragging him back to the day he told that young boy, "I believe in you." And now, the same unshakable fate stared back from his gaze, sealing what was coming. With hope blazing in his eyes, Rake watched as the dragon shoved a blinding light into its gaping maw, ready to unleash yet another devastating strike. Then it blasted out a massive surge of energy, and it detonated against the ground in a violent, earth-shaking explosion. The creature hovered over the smoke and rubble, drinking in the wreckage like it had taken something priceless. Rake refused to back down, then he threw a spell, summoned wind and wings, and yelled encouragement like he was counting on that sword to finish it. Fueled by a magical blast, Zweig surged ahead with a sword slung on his back, aimed it at the dragon, and screamed that they should hand it over to him. He poured his power into the blade and unleashed the ultimate finisher, Ice Wolf Flash, and a ghostly wolf made of pure frost erupted from his sword, surging straight for the dragon's head. The attack slammed into place, and in an instant, a jagged wall of ice wrapped the dragon's head and upper torso like a frozen coffin. Its colossal body is frozen solid, an entire dragon turned into a monument of ice. Below, cracked and frost-choked ground splits open, and the sword, rake, and the two armor guards stagger in place, finally catching their breath as the worst of the danger seems to be over. The armored guards gasp in or over Audrian's wig, shouting that Sword really beat it, and praising how perfectly they all moved together. Then Sword snaps his head to Rake, claiming the win was all him, but Rake just laughs and tells the boy the truth. This victory was earned by Sword's own grit. He keeps confessing that while he bragged about wanting to be brave, the second he faced the black dragon, fear hit him so hard he froze dead in his tracks. He tells them that watching those swords stand out front, with so much confidence, was exactly what lit the courage he needed to finally make his move. With a heartfelt wink, he declares that the sword is his dream, and with that praise, Sword's cheeks flare red, then he bursts into laughter, openly admitting he's mortified. When the crew finally regroups, Zwei blazes out that Sword got shattered in the brawl, and he shoves over his own blade. Audrey nods, saying one sword's nothing compared to crushing the black dragon, and just like that, Rake steps up too, offering his sword so Sword can strike again. Even while the cheers still buzz around him, Sword snaps his eyes back to the giant, ice-gold dragon's corpse, and unease crawls across his face. His unease isn't imagination, because right then, a crack splits the dragon's frozen head, and its once dead eye flares to life with a chilling, menacing glow. The boy's stomach drops with horror. He totally misjudged the black dragon, and now he can't even wrap his head around how it's still standing after he struck for its weak spot. Rake screams in panic, and as he hears that shout, he replays the split second of the attack when Sword's body moved on pure instinct. His thoughts get ripped apart when the dragon smashes its icy cage, and a storm of black flames erupts like a living tornado. The inferno swallows the spot where the sword stood, and Ray's throat tears as he screams the boy's name, because the blast chews him up in an instant. He got swallowed whole by a roaring sea of black fire, spat out by an enraged dragon, trapped inside an inferno that looked impossible to escape. The flames never burned him alive. Each spark twisted and pulled toward him, spiraling into a blazing vortex around his tiny body, while Rake and his guards stared in sheer, stunned disbelief. He felt that wild energy roiling around him, and knew it instantly. Demonic power, the exact same kind that hit him when he faced the Ice Wolf. The second he clocked it, his demon god style lit up in his mind. Now he feels the swirling energy obey him, and a ferocious grin cracks across his face as he announces, "This is perfect." The black flame storm collapsed and got sucked straight into his sword, and Rake plus the guards just stood there, frozen in disbelief, because then the sword turned to face the beast, and somehow thanked it for the power it had accidentally handed him. His look had totally shifted. Dark markings now circled his blazing, glowing eyes, and the mob character had leveled up, flashing a savage grin as he swore he'd get even stronger. With the colossal dragon roaring down on him, he plants his feet and grips his sword tight. Dark fire from the beast has been hammered into a crackling blade that won't stay stable, and the raw force of the clash shatters the earth under his stance. From a safe distance, Rake and his guards stare in shock. Rake can't believe it. He marvels at the blade's wild power and realizes this is the feat that turned the black dragon's flames into a sword. That young swordsman gets hit with a sudden flash of clarity, and with a faint smile on his face, he finally realizes what it really takes to activate demon god-style swordsmanship. Now he realizes this technique isn't just about taking a hit, it's about snapping into the right stance and bracing with purpose when the enemy's storm comes crashing in. Then it hits him, he's fighting to protect himself and the people he swears are his, and that unshakable resolve supercharges his power. With pure conviction blazing through him, he launches his attack. His black flame sword slams straight into the dragon's jaw, and the hit detonates with a deafening crash. The impact of that blow leaves every onlooker reeling. Then Rake shouts the sword's name, because he's clocked something else. The demon god style isn't just out there, it's living inside the sword's body too. His mind sprinted, snapping his new power into place with everything he'd learned before. He remembered the ice wall flash, the way that power inside the sword could unleash an ice blade that froze anything it cut. Then he zooms in on himself, on how his body siphoned the wolf's speed to tear into prey, and realizes the real power wasn't the weapon at all, it was inside him. The last piece clicks into place. He realizes the blade now houses the black dragon's flame blade, and the power now roaring through him is the dragon's own sky-ripping force, built to soar and smash the heavens. He rockets through the sky on wings of pure black flame, dives straight at the colossal dragon, and as it erupts in a pained, furious roar as the beast jerks back, he roars a challenge and dares the black dragon to swallow its own flames. With one last thunderous scream, he hurls the black dragon flame slash, and blasts his target straight into a furious whirlpool of stolen fire. The fiery attack swallows the dragon whole, then the sword slams into the ground with a solid thud. His flame-forged blade breaks apart into sizzling embers as he lifts a triumphant fist. And in the back, Reek and his guards just stare, frozen in stunned silence. The black dragon, straight up the heart of the demon dimension, burned itself to ash and vanished without a trace, only scorched earth screaming where it used to be. Moments later, Sword and the crew barreled toward the spot where the creature finally fell, faces split between stunned disbelief and instant, overwhelming relief. Right in the heart of the crater, they uncover the wreckage the dragon left behind, an enormous glittering magic stone. As the sword locks its gaze on the crystal, Audrey blurts to Rake, freaking out, saying a magic stone this huge has to be worth more than anyone can imagine, and Rake just nods with a calm smirk, claiming it's worth at least $1 billion. But Sword's mind's eyes aren't on money. His grin widens in a heartbeat because one blazing thought takes over. With this, he can forge a sword. Elsewhere, a young girl with hair in pigtails clutches her chest tight, and a small, pained gasp slips out of her. She keeps her eyes on Tilty, watching the younger girl fight tooth and nail to control that swirling dark energy. Shaluria leans in and roars, "Keep going, Tilty, focus and take control." Tilty grits her teeth and groans through the strain, and Shaluria tells her, voice steady, "You're doing great, you're almost there." Her focus snaps at last, the power fizzles out, and Tilty crumples to her hands and knees, panting, whispering that she's failed, while Shaluria sprints over and pushes her to rest after all that training without even a breather. Even though she's wiped out, Tilty snaps her gaze upward, sweat dripping down her brow, and tells herself Shaluria, then hardens her resolve. She won't quit because her big brother is out there grinding too. Shaluria just meets her with a soft, knowing smile. Her friend brushes it off with stubborn, and Tilty shoots back a tiny, sheepish apology. The chat gets ripped apart by a thunderous crash outside, and both girls jerk around, eyes wide, trying to figure out what just hit. One of them blurts out, "Hey," as she pulls out her screen, still staring at the noise like it might strike again. The cause is a massive explosion that rips straight through the courtyard, blasting a roaring cloud of smoke and debris everywhere it goes. In the dust settling over the chaos, a gravely wounded guard gapes in shock, staring at the wreckage, and swears it can't be true because his opponent can't be dead. Fallen guards are sprawled all around, unmoving. From the smoke, that terrifying presence lunges back into view. Dagora towers there, shredded in every direction, roaring his own name while a sinister power blasts from his right hand. He rips through the wreckage with a furious snarl, barking out where that brat is, and when his eyes lock onto a severed arm on the ground, he goes dead serious, vowing he'll kill him. A flashback hits Dagora, beaten and fading fast, gets confronted by a hooded stranger who offers him a demonic power that can bite back at magic, then slams a weird three-eyed relic onto his hand. Now in the present, Dagora jolts awake in a dead, root-choked wasteland, staring up like, "Am I alive?" as the robed figure watches in silence. The masked master with the bird-like headpiece stared Dagora down and told the resurrected warrior flat out, this was his last chance. Power surged through him, overflowing his bones. Dagora clenched his fist and swore to his master that he didn't need another word. He would make that brat regret everything. He charged up to a grand mansion, the ground snapping beneath his feet as he unleashed a roaring declaration that he'd reveal himself and blow it all apart, until a desperate cry cut through his rampage. "Stop." Tilty and Shaluria stepped out to face him, Shaluria taking a protective stance as she snapped that her big brother wasn't here, and she wouldn't let him lay a hand on the Hartman. His crazed eyes locked onto Tilty. He sneered with recognition, the dark maiden he'd been craving, and demanded she hand over her dark power again. As he charged forward, Tilty spun toward Shaluria and blurted out an apology, furious that he'd pulled her into this nightmare. She'd followed her clairvoyance straight to the mansion, trusting fate, but everything had changed now, and Shaluria snapped back that she didn't need any apologies at all. A fire of fresh resolve burned in her eyes, and Shaluria boldly declared she'd decided for herself. No more chasing fate, because she was determined to protect Tilty. He scoffed at her words, laughing at the thought of her protecting anyone, and mocked her resolve, while Tilty watched her friend with a soft, trusting smile. Shaluria shot her hand forward and whipped up a swirling vortex of air, then slammed a brutal wind wall in place to protect them as Dagora erupted in rage, snarling that the brat better not get in her way. With one last furious shout, he slammed his fist straight through the magical barrier, blasting apart the gale with raw brute force. Then a scream cut through the chaos as the wind finally tore itself apart. The blast's shockwave slammed Shaluria into the dirt, and she snapped her eyes to her friend. There was Tilty, clawing at the rubble, struggling to get up, groaning through the pain. He didn't waste a second. He lunged forward and grabbed Tilty by the arm, yanking her off the ground with effortless strength while Shilurio just stared, totally helpless. He cackled and demanded the maiden's dark power, then snarled that he'd murder everyone if she wouldn't hand over that supreme strength. As Tilty fought to hold on, Shaluria screamed at her to stay strong and not give in. Tilty's body exploded with volatile dark energy, and it whipped and spiraled around Agora's arm and hand like a raging storm. Dagora roared in pure delight, locking onto the exact power he'd been chasing, and as he basked in that rush, Shaluria, still sprawled on the ground, could only scream her friend's name, terrified and helpless. Tears burned in her eyes, but steel hardened her face. She knew exactly what came next. I can do it, she vowed to herself, over and over. The story cuts straight into Tilty's mind, where she faces a silver-haired older young woman and spits out defiantly, I'm not afraid of the dark, I'll take control of it myself. But her resolve cracked. When the darkness surged in, it drowned her in brutal visions of pain and heartbreak, until the torment finally snapped her, and a desperate scream ripped out of her. Inside her mind, Tilty crumpled, choking out that her heart couldn't possibly break, while the silver-haired figure just stood there, watching. Still, even as doubt swallowed her, she managed to push her shaky voice to Shaluria, thanking her and insisting barely that she was fine. The silver-haired woman leaned in and delivered the grim truth. Tilty's dark power isn't random, it's forged by her negative emotions, and the only way to rein it in is to wrestle those feelings down. But her sadness and pain hit too hard, and she can't break through. She begged through the chaos, pleading with her dark power to help, right as Dagora clamped down, holding her law in place. Her words weren't begging for destruction at all, they were begging for change. Tears poured down her face as she pleaded with that power. Don't let it ruin people, let it bring happiness to everyone. Dagora just stared, frozen in stunned silence by how boldly she'd spoken. Obeying her will, the swirling darkness roared upward, and forged two massive, shadow-cloaked hands that hung over them like nightmares. Dagora watched the colossal appendages drop in, and then his heart slammed when he realized they were locking onto his arm, wrapping tight. Right before he could react, the darkness exploded over him and swallowed him whole, squeezing like a vice. He tore out a gut-wrenching scream as the power tightened its grip. From a safe distance, Shaluria's tense face melted into pure relief, as she realized Tilty had finally crushed her in a turmoil. And now she's in full control. This dark power, once chaos itself, has become a weapon forged by her will, while Tilty insists that whatever she's dreaming of matters more than her own heartbreak.